Hello, I am Katelyn, and this is my project on market research on airline data. Just to kick it off, a quick overview of the market and a couple things to note are that the growth of the market in the airline industry since the 21st century has been substantial. There have been huge advancements in technology and world trade and in partnerships globally, which have just boosted the industry to what it is today. A couple things to note that the airline industry is super susceptible to the following factors: political, environmental, economic, and social. This kind of just a given, but thought it should be said. Moving into my second point is the airline industry is so huge, and to illustrate and paint that picture, these statistics will help bring it up. So in 2018, there were 4.34 billion passengers, and then in 2019, there were 4.59 billion passengers. This indicates and shows that billions of people throughout the course of the year are literally in the sky above us right now. And then for the revenue and profits, because you have billions of passengers, you get billion-dollar industry profits. And in 2018, the profits were 824 billion, and then in 2019, they were 885 billion. And then the net profits for 2019 were 35.5 billion, and then in 2018, they were 32.3 billion. So literally, the airline industry is a billion-dollar baller, and it's just a huge industry. So that picture has been painted. Moving on to my third point very quickly, there are 17,678 airports around the world that are commercial, and the top competitors are United, American, and Delta. So getting into the meat and bones of this presentation, we were given an Excel spreadsheet that had various columns with various titles of data to study and interpret. Data means nothing unless it can tell a story and unless you can interpret it to tell a story. So I like to do the 5 W's of the who, what, when, where, and why to go over that story. To tell it, we know that where the data came from, the data airq402.dat. The what is going to be the U.S. Department of Transportation. That can also tie into the where, which is the airfares and passengers for the U.S. domestic flights. The when is going to be in the fourth quarter of the year of 2002. And the why is this whole presentation we're going to be on together and the paper that I wrote. I do just want to point out, and we'll kind of move into the next slide. So because the data that was given was taken place in the year of 2002 of quarter 4, that was exactly a year after September 11th. So that was a significant day in American history. And after September 11th, as we all know, that event changed the airline industry indefinitely. So that's where TSA came from, right? Significantly after the event happened, air travel was suspended. They had to put in place protocols and procedures to make sure that passengers felt safe to get on a plane and be transported from point A to point B. As we covered in chapter 14, we talked about what businesses do in uncertain times to make educated business decisions to move forward and to keep their corner of the market and to stay, alive, sustainable, and thriving. I chose to look at this data and say, because of what we read in chapter 14, we can look at the data that happened September 11th all the way to Q4 of 2002 and take that data and compare it to what is currently happening with the global health pandemic of the coronavirus. So although the year 2002 reflects a national security crisis, the coronavirus is a global health pandemic. They are a little bit different, but there are some similarities in understanding how this affected the airline industry overall and how to make a comeback. It is going to boil down to the coronavirus being able to get under control and for there to be protocols and procedures of safety in place for people to feel comfortable enough to spend their hard-earned money to get on a plane, be less than 6 feet from somebody, and feel like they're not going to catch the virus. So that was the whole kind of point of my paper and the why, and we'll just kind of continue to go. One thing I want to talk about really fast, this Forbes article did cover that there are 5 key issues to consider when coming back from COVID for airline industries. I'm just going to rapid fire through them. 1, volume will probably not regain its peak for at least 3 to 5 years depending on the distance segment. 2, price recovery will lag volume recovery by at least a year. 3, business travel will recover more quickly than leisure travel, but at a permanently lower level. This is literally because of Zoom. We can get on Zoom all over the world and Zoom it up and meet virtually. 4, long-haul narrow-body aircraft will change the nature of the international networks by replacing hub-and-spoke models with a point-to-point flying. And then 5, regional travel will move from an expensive business-oriented model to a cheaper leisure-oriented model. That's due to point number 3. So just keep that in mind. Then moving on to my why. So my regressions and everything, I chose to compare price to the weekly number of passengers. And then I do just want to say that was my first regression. The second and third regression were putting in the leaders in the market and the lower competitors in the market with the price versus the weekly number of passengers. I do just want to say when people search that they want to go to Chicago for a flight, they're not going to be like, let's check United's market share to see where they are in the market. They're not going to do that, but I just think because I'm comparing the events of what happened in on September 11th in 2001, a full year later, and tying that into what we're going to do after the COVID pandemic to the airline industry, I think it's important to see what the top tier and the low tier of the market did. So that's what I'm going to explain. So moving forward, progression, or for the regression results of price versus weekly number of passengers, we have this level of significance here. It's a really good level of significance. It shows that the airline industry overall is healthy. It's bounced back, it's continuing to grow, which signifies good things. This is the equation that I got because this coefficient right here of price is negative. It tells me that if the price is raised, the weekly number of passengers is going to decrease. So across the board, nobody in the top or lower tier of this industry needs to raise their ticket prices. Moving forward to the price in the market leader market share versus the weekly number of passengers. So again, I wanted to see what did the top leaders in the market do at this time in 2002. So the first equation goes over price. Again, same as the first one, should not raise price because it'll decrease the weekly number of passengers. And then for the market leader market share, it's also negative, which shows that they, in fact, should not raise their prices. I also want to point out that the leaders in the market typically are going to have larger expenses because they're going to own more aircraft carriers, they're going to have more employees, they're going to have to pay more employee benefits. They're just going to be bigger, so their lag time when travel was suspended in 2001 leading back to when it returned, they have more to catch up and pay off than a smaller, lower competitor does. So there's that one. And then moving into the price and low price competitor market versus the weekly number of passengers, again, and even on the last side, significance look good, says that from the top to the lowest, everything looks good within the market. And then here from this equation with the low price competitor, it does signify that they can in fact raise their prices. They're the only one in the market that can actually raise their prices and still keep a great weekly number of passengers. So that shows me that there's a ton of potential for growth in the market for the lower competitors. And again, as stated before, they don't have as many aircraft carriers or employees or protocols and procedures that they're going to have to go through because they are in that lower end of the market. With that being said, when we compare that to the price, that negative coefficient is still telling me that as of right now, they shouldn't raise their prices, but in the future, they are going to have potential to grow. So that's good for them. So looking at the price, looking at all that data from 2002 of Q4, my conclusions are ticket prices shouldn't be raised, the lowest competitors have the most growth potential, and overall the airline industry is looking good a year after the events of 9/11. Taking that and comparing that to what we learned in Chapter 14, having information to make educated decisions, we can take this data and predict that a year after COVID is under control or handled, they will be able to move forward and be successful. So my suggestions would be that all the airline industries, the leaders in the market, the lower people in the market, their own personal company to the industry at all, they need to review all the data. They need to find the commonalities, they need to find the points in history, and they need to find just patterns of, hey, you know what, this is what we should do our pricing strategy with. This is how we can combat this. They just kind of need to get their game plan from the data because that's going to help them make the most informed decisions. Moving forward, they need to track COVID pandemic closely. So they need to look at, where are there regions where there's the least amount of cases or there's the most amount of cases, and base their regional marketing and regional targeting off of where the cases are low and where there's growth and potential, and then use price discrimination when people book that. We covered that in one of the chapters, how there's like a perfect equilibrium between the company getting the most bang for their buck and the person getting the most bang for their buck. And then they just need to fast track the COVID protocols and procedures with the World Health Organization to get people back on a plane to where it's safe to continue to provide their services. It was lovely having class with all of you. Thank you for this year in this class, and happy holidays.